Stay with me, because behind one locked basement door, a millionaire's perfect birthday became the beginning of his destruction. The music started at exactly 8 o'clock. A live jazz band played beside the grand staircase while crystal chandeliers spilled golden light across the marble floors of Ethan Bennett's mansion overlooking Lake Michigan. Waiters carried trays of champagne through crowds of senators, investors, celebrities, and social media influencers, all gathered to celebrate the 42nd birthday of one of Chicago's most admired businessmen. Laughter echoed through the ballroom. Expensive watches flashed beneath designer sleeves. Camera phones captured every polished moment of Ethan Bennett smiling beside a 5-tier birthday cake decorated in black and gold. From the outside, it looked like the kind of night magazines would call legendary. But beneath the mansion, under 3 floors of heated marble and polished luxury, Claire Bennett pressed both trembling hands against the steel door and screamed her husband's name into the darkness. "Ethan, please." Her voice cracked before the words fully escaped. 8 months pregnant, exhausted, and trapped inside a freezing underground wine cellar, Claire could barely stay standing anymore. Her pale blue maternity dress clung to her skin from sweat and cold at the same time. One hand stayed protectively over her stomach while the other pounded weakly against the metal. The sound barely traveled beyond the concrete walls surrounding her. Above her, hundreds of guests cheered as Ethan raised another glass. Down below, his wife struggled to breathe through another painful contraction. The contrast felt unreal. Jazz music upstairs. Silence downstairs. Birthday candles above. Darkness below. Claire slid slowly to the floor beside stacks of imported wine bottles worth more than most people's yearly salaries. The cold concrete pressed against her back. Her wedding ring caught a faint beam of emergency light blinking red near the ceiling. 3% battery remaining. That was all her phone had left. Claire stared at the screen through blurred vision and pressed record again. "If anyone finds this," she whispered shakily into the voice memo, forcing herself not to cry. "My husband locked me down here after I found the transfer documents." Ethan moved everything into offshore accounts under Vanessa Hale's name. "If something happens to me or my baby," her breath hitched painfully. Somewhere above her, faint vibrations rattled through the ceiling. More applause. More music. Ethan was probably making another speech by now. Probably smiling that practiced smile investors trusted and reporters loved. Claire closed her eyes for one dangerous second and instantly remembered how different he used to be. 5 years earlier, Ethan Bennett had kissed her forehead in a tiny apartment while eating takeout Chinese food from paper containers because they couldn't afford furniture yet. Back then, he called her his lucky charm. Back then, he held her hand every night and promised they would build an empire together. And they did. Claire used her law degree to help structure his earliest business deals. She reviewed contracts. She protected his company during lawsuits. She worked beside him through every sleepless year until Bennett Capital became worth nearly $800 million. Then the money changed him. Or maybe it revealed who he already was. Claire noticed it slowly at first. Missed anniversaries. Late-night meetings. A new assistant named Vanessa who somehow never left Ethan's side. Then came the hidden bank statements. The deleted texts. The coldness in his eyes whenever Claire talked about the baby. Last night, she confronted him in his private office after discovering documents connected to an overseas account. She still remembered the exact moment his expression changed. Not angry. Not guilty. Empty. Like someone flipping off a light switch. "You should have stayed out of things that don't concern you," Ethan told her quietly before taking her phone from her hands. Claire swallowed hard against the memory. The baby shifted suddenly beneath her ribs, and fear surged through her chest again. "I know, sweetheart," she whispered weakly, rubbing her stomach. "Mommy's trying." Upstairs, the birthday party grew louder. Downstairs, the basement grew colder. Then Claire heard something. Not music. Not the air vents. Footsteps. Very faint. Very distant. She froze completely. Another step. Somewhere beyond the hidden storage wall near the wine racks. Claire forced herself upward despite the sharp ache in her lower back. "Help!" she shouted louder this time. "Please. Somebody help me." Silence followed for 2 terrifying seconds. Then another sound came through the wall. The soft clatter of metal trays hitting the floor. And a woman gasping in shock. Rosa dropped to her knees beside Claire so quickly the cold concrete scraped through her uniform stockings. "Claire, look at me." she whispered urgently, brushing damp hair away from the younger woman's face. Can you stand? Claire tried to answer, but another sharp contraction stole the air from her lungs before words could fully form. She gripped Rosa's wrist tightly instead, panic flooding her exhausted blue eyes. The emergency light above them flickered again, throwing shadows across the endless rows of wine bottles lining the cellar walls. Everything smelled like dust, cedar wood, and expensive liquor. Somewhere water dripped steadily inside the darkness. Upstairs, the muffled sound of laughter continued, as if two separate worlds existed inside the same mansion. Rosa pulled off her cardigan immediately and wrapped it around Claire's shoulders. You are freezing, she said softly. We need to get you upstairs right now. Claire shook her head weakly. No hospital yet. Her voice trembled. My phone. Rosa spotted the device lying beside overturned crates. The screen glowed faintly with 1% battery remaining. She picked it up carefully and noticed several recorded voice memos still open. Then she saw something else. A folder labeled offshore transfers. Beside it sat scanned documents showing Ethan Bennett's signature attached to account numbers in the Cayman Islands. Rosa's stomach turned cold for reasons that had nothing to do with the cellar temperature. Claire watched her expression closely. He knows I found them, she whispered. That is why he put me down here. Rosa looked toward the steel door behind them, suddenly aware of how impossible the situation felt. Ethan Bennett was not just wealthy. He practically owned half the city. Politicians attended his parties. Judges played golf with him. News anchors praised him every month on television as a self-made American success story. And now his pregnant wife sat shaking on a basement floor saying he locked her underground during his own birthday celebration. Rosa had cleaned houses long enough to understand one dangerous truth. Powerful men survived because nobody wanted to believe ugly things about them. Another painful wave hit Claire without warning. She bent forward sharply, breathing unevenly while gripping her stomach protectively. Rosa's heart nearly stopped. The baby? She asked quickly. Claire nodded after a moment. Still moving. Her eyes filled with tears she fought desperately to hold back. But it has been hours. I do not know how long. Rosa checked the time on her watch. 9:27. Claire had disappeared sometime the previous evening. Nearly 24 hours. Jesus Christ. Rosa reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her own phone with trembling fingers. Before she could unlock it, footsteps echoed faintly somewhere beyond the hallway upstairs. Both women froze instantly. Claire's face drained of color. He cannot find me gone, she whispered urgently. If Ethan sees the door open before we leave. Rosa listened carefully. The footsteps passed overhead and faded again toward the ballroom. Probably security. Or waiters. Still, fear settled heavily into the room now. Rosa helped Claire sit upright against the wall while opening her contacts. There was only one person she trusted enough to call. Daniel Carter answered on the second ring. Rosa? His deep voice sounded confused over loud background traffic. Everything okay at the house? Rosa lowered her voice immediately. No. Listen carefully. It is Claire. Silence hit the line instantly. Then came the sound of a car door slamming. What happened? Daniel asked sharply. Rosa glanced at Claire before speaking. I found her locked inside the wine cellar basement. She is pregnant and weak, and something is very wrong here. On the other end of the line, Daniel stopped breathing for half a second. Rosa had known Claire's older brother for years. Former Marine. Now an investigator for federal financial crimes. Calm under pressure. Careful with words. But when he finally spoke again, rage pressed beneath every syllable. Do not let Ethan know you found her, he said quietly. I am 20 minutes away. Rosa nodded, even though he could not see her. Hurry. The call ended. Claire stared down at the phone in Rosa's hands. Daniel, she whispered. Rosa nodded gently. Relief flashed across Claire's face for the first time all night, but it disappeared almost immediately when another sound drifted through the basement. Not footsteps this time. Music. Ethan's voice echoed faintly through ceiling speakers connected to the ballroom above them. To loyalty, he announced confidently while guests applauded. Claire closed her eyes slowly as tears slipped down her pale cheeks. Rosa looked upward toward the ceiling with growing horror, while Ethan continued speaking to hundreds of wealthy guests directly above the hidden cellar. Tonight is about family, he said warmly, the crowd cheering again beneath crystal chandeliers while his pregnant wife sat trapped underground listening to every word. The mansion felt colder after Ethan's speech ended. Applause thundered above the basement ceiling, while Claire sat motionless against the concrete wall listening to strangers celebrate the man who had locked her underground less than 24 hours earlier. Rosa stayed beside her now, one arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders while anxiously checking the hallway every few seconds. Every sound carried new danger. Every passing footstep made both women freeze. Claire swallowed painfully and stared at the dim emergency light blinking over the wine racks. He practiced those speeches in the mirror, she whispered weakly. Did you know that? Rosa looked down at her carefully. Claire's voice sounded distant now, almost detached from reality. Every birthday, every fundraiser, every interview. Ethan used to stand in front of the bathroom mirror for hours rehearsing how to sound humble. Upstairs, another burst of laughter echoed faintly through the ceiling speakers. Claire gave a bitter smile that disappeared almost instantly. He always said people trust whatever makes them feel comfortable. Rosa tightened the cardigan around Claire's shoulders. Save your strength, she whispered gently. Daniel is coming. Claire nodded slowly, but fear still clouded her expression. You do not understand, she said quietly. Ethan plans everything. Rosa frowned. What do you mean? Claire hesitated before answering. 3 months ago, Ethan changed the entire household security system. New cameras, new passwords. Even the guards work for his private company now instead of the old agency. Her breathing trembled slightly. If he realizes somebody opened this door before Daniel gets here. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Rosa understood. The silence that followed felt heavier than the basement walls themselves. Then Rosa's phone vibrated suddenly in her apron pocket, making both women jump. Daniel. Rosa answered immediately, but kept her voice low. Where are you? Outside the north gate, Daniel replied. Wind rushed loudly through his phone speaker. The security team refuses to let me onto the property. Rosa closed her eyes briefly. Of course they would. Ethan controlled every inch of this estate tonight. What do we do? She whispered. Daniel's voice sharpened instantly. Listen carefully. Is Claire conscious? Yes. Can she walk? Rosa glanced toward Claire, who looked pale but alert. Maybe slowly. Good, Daniel said. There is a secondary service exit connected to the basement storage tunnels. Old houses like this usually have one near the generator room. Find it. Rosa stood carefully and helped Claire rise beside her. Claire nearly collapsed from dizziness before catching herself against the wall. Rosa wrapped one arm around her waist immediately. Easy, she whispered. The cold had stiffened Claire's legs badly after hours underground. Rosa grabbed the emergency flashlight hanging beside the cellar door and slowly guided Claire deeper through the wine storage corridor. Rows of dusty bottles stretched endlessly into darkness, while their footsteps echoed softly across concrete floors. The flashlight beam shook slightly in Rosa's trembling hand. Halfway down the corridor, Claire suddenly stopped walking. Wait! Rosa turned quickly. What is it? Claire stared toward a narrow hallway branching behind the storage shelves. That room was not open yesterday. Rosa pointed the flashlight toward the darkness. A steel door stood partially open at the end of the hallway. Neither woman had noticed it earlier. The air felt different there somehow. Colder. Claire swallowed hard. Ethan renovated this part of the basement last month, she whispered. He said it was private storage. Rosa hesitated only a second before leading Claire carefully toward the door. The beam of light slid across metal shelves stacked with sealed document boxes, computer equipment, and expensive artwork wrapped in plastic coverings. Then Rosa noticed the safe built directly into the far concrete wall. Its heavy steel door remained slightly open. Claire stared at it silently as realization spread slowly across her exhausted face. Oh my God, she whispered. Rosa moved closer. Inside the safe sat multiple passports, stacks of financial records, and several external hard drives labeled with dates. Offshore accounts, shell companies, transfer agreements, hidden assets worth millions. Claire covered her mouth shakily. This is everything. Rosa turned another flashlight angle toward the lower shelf and froze completely. A digital recorder blinked red beside the documents. Recording. Claire reached for it carefully and pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the small room instantly. Calm, controlled, familiar. Once the transfer clears Friday morning, he said clearly. Claire signs nothing. Understood. Another voice answered softly. Vanessa Hale. And if she refuses? Ethan gave a small laugh. She will not be a problem much longer. Claire's face drained completely of color. Rosa stopped the recording immediately, her heartbeat hammering so loudly she barely heard the next sound coming from the hallway outside. Footsteps. Multiple pairs this time. Heavy. Fast. Claire grabbed Rosa's arm in panic. Then Ethan's voice echoed faintly through the basement corridor above the music still playing upstairs. "Check the lower level," he ordered coldly. Now. The basement air suddenly felt too thin to breathe. Rosa shut off the recorder so fast her fingers slipped against the metal casing, and for one terrifying second the device nearly crashed onto the concrete floor. Claire grabbed it just in time, pressing both trembling hands over the small speaker while footsteps echoed louder through the corridor outside. "This way," Rosa whispered urgently. She swung the flashlight toward the back wall of the hidden storage room, where another narrow hallway disappeared into darkness. Claire moved carefully beside her, one hand supporting her stomach while the other clutched the recorder against her chest like evidence pulled from a grave. Every few seconds, she stopped to steady herself against the wall. The contractions were growing closer together now. Rosa could see it in the tension across her face. Upstairs, the music shifted into slower piano melodies while expensive laughter drifted faintly through the ventilation system. The contrast no longer felt unreal. It felt monstrous. Somewhere above them, wealthy guests toasted Ethan Bennett, while two frightened women disappeared deeper beneath his mansion carrying proof that could destroy him forever. Behind them, a flashlight beam suddenly sliced across the wine cellar hallway. "Check every room," a man's voice ordered sharply. "Security." Rosa pushed Claire forward faster. "Move." The narrow passage opened into an older section of the basement untouched by recent renovations. The polished luxury vanished completely here. Concrete walls sweated moisture beneath rusted pipes overhead. Dust coated abandoned shelves filled with paint cans, broken furniture, and decades-old electrical equipment. The air smelled damp and metallic. Rosa spotted a faded exit sign flickering near the far corner. Relief flashed through her instantly. "There," she whispered. Claire tried to walk faster, but suddenly froze mid-step, gripping the wall hard enough for her knuckles to whiten. Pain crossed her face before she could hide it. Rosa turned immediately. "Another contraction?" Claire nodded shakily, struggling to breathe evenly. "They are closer now." Panic crept into Rosa's chest. Daniel was not here yet. Ethan's security team was searching the basement, and Claire looked dangerously exhausted. Rosa pulled out her phone again with trembling hands. No signal. Thick concrete blocked everything underground. "Come on," she whispered desperately. "Just a little farther." They reached the old service door beside the generator room seconds later. Rosa grabbed the rusted handle and twisted hard. Nothing. Locked from the outside. "No," she whispered under her breath. She pulled again harder this time. Still nothing. Behind them, another flashlight beam swept briefly across the distant hallway entrance. Closer now. Claire leaned weakly against the wall beside the exit while trying to stay calm. "Rosa," she whispered. Rosa looked at her instantly. Claire slowly raised the recorder in her shaking hand. "If he catches us, take this to Daniel." Rosa stared at her in disbelief. "Do not say that. Listen to me." Claire's voice broke slightly. "That recording matters more than anything now." Another contraction hit before she finished speaking. Rosa caught her immediately before she slid to the floor. Fear crashed through Rosa so hard it nearly stopped her breathing. Then suddenly 3 loud knocks sounded against the opposite side of the service door. Both women froze. Silence followed. Then a familiar voice came through the metal. "Claire, Daniel." Claire nearly collapsed from relief. Rosa unlocked the deadbolt while Daniel forced the heavy door open from outside. Cold night air rushed into the basement corridor instantly. Daniel Carter stepped inside wearing a dark jacket over jeans, rainwater still dripping from his shoulders. One look at Claire changed his entire face. Rage flickered through him so quickly it almost looked physical. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. Claire tried to smile weakly, but tears filled her eyes instead. Daniel crossed the room immediately and wrapped one steady arm around her shoulders. "I have you," he said quietly. "You are safe now." But even as he said the words, footsteps exploded behind them deeper inside the basement. Security had found the open storage room. Flashlights swept wildly through the corridor accompanied by shouting voices. Daniel's expression hardened instantly. "How many?" he asked Rosa. At least 3. Daniel looked toward the approaching lights, then back toward Claire. The former Marine inside him surfaced immediately. Calm. Precise. Dangerous. Can you walk to the car? Claire nodded weakly. Good. He handed Rosa his phone. Call 911 the second we are outside the gate. Then Daniel noticed the recorder still clutched in Claire's hand. What is that? Claire looked up at him through exhausted eyes. Proof. Daniel pressed play for only 5 seconds before Ethan's recorded voice filled the corridor again. Once the transfer clears Friday morning, Claire signs nothing. Understood? Daniel stopped the playback slowly. His jaw tightened so hard the muscle moved beneath his skin. Behind them, security lights grew brighter every second. Go, he ordered quietly. Right now. Upstairs, beyond 3 floors of marble and champagne and birthday music, Ethan Bennett was still smiling for cameras, while his entire empire began collapsing beneath his feet. Rain hammered against the black SUV as Daniel sped through the winding roads away from the Bennett estate. Claire sat curled in the back seat beneath Rosa's cardigan, one trembling hand pressed against her stomach, while city lights blurred through the rain-streaked windows beside her. Every bump in the road made her wince softly. Rosa stayed close, holding Claire upright whenever another contraction tightened across her body. Nobody spoke for the first several minutes. The silence inside the vehicle felt heavy with exhaustion, fear, and the realization that everything had changed forever. Behind them, Ethan Bennett's birthday party still glowed across the hillside like a palace floating in darkness, but Daniel knew exactly what would happen the second Ethan discovered Claire was gone. The security team would search the property. Phones would start ringing. Lawyers would wake up. By morning, every powerful person connected to Ethan Bennett would already be trying to contain the damage. Daniel tightened both hands around the steering wheel. We are not going to the nearest hospital, he finally said. Rosa looked at him quickly. Why not? Because Ethan owns half the board members there. Daniel glanced toward the rearview mirror where Claire sat pale and exhausted beneath the dim interior lights. If he realizes Claire has evidence against him, he will try to control the situation before police get involved. Claire swallowed painfully. He still does not know about the recording. Daniel nodded once. Good. Rain thundered harder across the windshield while the SUV crossed downtown Chicago. The city looked cold and silver beneath the storm clouds. Claire stared silently at the glowing skyline she once loved. For years she had attended charity galas in those towers beside Ethan, smiling for photographs while magazines called them Chicago's golden couple. She remembered standing beside him during interviews while reporters praised their marriage as a modern American success story. Beautiful lawyer supports brilliant billionaire husband. Perfect family. Perfect future. The lie almost made her sick now. Rosa suddenly reached for Claire's hand. Feel that? She whispered nervously. Claire nodded slowly. Another contraction. Stronger this time. Daniel heard the change in her breathing immediately and accelerated through a yellow light. 10 more minutes, he said firmly. Dr. Amelia Grant is waiting. Claire looked up weakly. Amelia? I called her before entering the mansion. Daniel's voice remained calm, controlled. She owes me a favor. Outside, the storm intensified. Thunder rolled above the city while ambulance sirens echoed somewhere in the distance. Claire closed her eyes briefly and tried focusing on the baby moving beneath her ribs. Still moving. Thank God. But exhaustion dragged heavily against her now. The cold basement air still clung to her skin, no matter how tightly Rosa wrapped the cardigan around her shoulders. Then her phone suddenly vibrated in Daniel's jacket pocket, connected through the SUV speakers. Ethan Bennett. Claire's entire body stiffened instantly. Daniel stared at the incoming call for one long second before answering through Bluetooth. Ethan's voice filled the SUV immediately, smooth and controlled despite the tension beneath it. Daniel. Daniel kept driving. Ethan. A dangerous silence stretched across the line. Then Ethan spoke again carefully. You removed my wife from my home without permission. Claire shut her eyes as soon as she heard him say my wife. Not concern. Not fear. Ownership. Daniel's voice hardened instantly. Your wife was locked underground. Ethan gave a soft laugh that sounded almost disappointed. Claire has been emotionally unstable for months. Pregnancy complications. Stress. You know how dramatic she can become. Rosa looked horrified. Claire stared at the dark window beside her, tears quietly filling her eyes. Ethan continued speaking in the same calm public relations tone he used during television interviews. I was trying to protect her from embarrassing herself tonight. Daniel's knuckles whitened against the steering wheel. I heard the recording. Silence crashed through the SUV immediately. For the first time, Ethan stopped sounding polished. What recording? Daniel did not answer. Rain pounded against the roof while the city lights reflected coldly across Claire's exhausted face. Finally, Ethan exhaled slowly. Daniel, listen carefully. Whatever Claire showed you is being misunderstood. Save it, Daniel replied coldly. Police are already involved. That was a lie, but it landed exactly how Daniel intended. Ethan went silent again. Then his voice returned lower than before. Dangerous now. Real. You have no idea what you are stepping into. Daniel pulled the SUV sharply beneath the covered entrance of a private medical building downtown. No, he said quietly while putting the vehicle in park. You do. He ended the call. The doors opened instantly as Dr. Amelia Grant and two nurses rushed outside, pushing a wheelchair through the rain. Claire tried standing, but nearly collapsed from weakness before Daniel caught her carefully. Amelia's expression changed the moment she saw Claire's condition. Oh my God! Claire looked up at her through exhausted eyes. The baby is still moving, she whispered shakily. Amelia nodded quickly while helping guide her toward the entrance. Then that is all we focus on right now. Behind them, thunder rolled across Chicago while somewhere far away inside a mansion filled with politicians, investors, and crystal chandeliers, Ethan Bennett finally realized the woman he tried to silence was still alive. The private medical clinic sat 20 floors above downtown Chicago, hidden behind tinted glass and silent hallways designed for wealthy patients who paid extra for privacy. Tonight the building felt less like a hospital and more like a bunker. Rain slammed against the windows overlooking the city while Dr. Amelia Grant guided Claire into a secured treatment room away from public elevators and reception areas. Nurses moved quickly around her checking blood pressure, monitoring the baby's heartbeat, wrapping warm blankets around her freezing body. Every machine beeped softly beneath the dim lighting while thunder rolled outside like distant artillery. Claire lay against the hospital bed trembling from exhaustion as Amelia studied the monitor beside her. Finally, the doctor exhaled carefully. The baby is stable. Relief crashed through the room instantly. Rosa covered her mouth with both hands while Daniel stepped back against the wall and closed his eyes briefly for the first time all night. Claire herself looked like she might cry from pure exhaustion. But Amelia continued quietly. Your body has been under severe stress for too long. You need rest immediately. Claire nodded weakly while staring at the ceiling above her. The white hospital lights blurred together through tears she no longer had energy to hide. Daniel moved closer beside the bed. You are safe here, he told her softly. Claire looked at him for a long moment before whispering the one question haunting her since leaving the mansion. What happens now? Daniel exchanged a glance with Amelia before pulling the recorder from his jacket pocket. Now we destroy him. Across the room, Rosa stared nervously toward the locked hospital door. Ethan will not stop, she whispered. Men like him never stop. Daniel looked down at the recorder in his hand. That depends on what else Claire found. Claire slowly lifted her eyes toward him. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then, with trembling fingers, she reached toward the bedside table where Rosa had placed her nearly dead phone connected to a charger. There is more, she whispered. Daniel handed her the device carefully. Claire unlocked the screen and opened a hidden folder buried beneath old family photos. Hundreds of scanned documents appeared instantly. Financial transfers, shell companies, property deeds, offshore accounts. Daniel's expression darkened with every swipe across the screen. Jesus Christ. Claire swallowed hard before speaking again. 3 months ago, Ethan accidentally left his office computer unlocked during a board dinner. Her voice sounded hollow now, detached from the memory itself. At first I thought he was hiding money because of taxes. She looked down at her shaking hands. Then I realized the accounts were connected to politicians, construction contracts, and bribery investigations already under federal review. Daniel looked up sharply. You copied all this? Claire nodded once. I started collecting everything after Vanessa moved into his executive suite. Rosa frowned. The assistant? Claire gave a weak, bitter smile. Not just an assistant. She looked toward Daniel again. Vanessa has been helping Ethan move assets overseas for nearly a year. They planned to disappear after the IPO closed. Thunder rattled the windows again, while silence settled heavily across the room. Daniel understood exactly what that meant. Ethan Bennett was no longer just an unfaithful husband hiding money from his wife. This had become something far bigger. Federal crimes. Fraud. Conspiracy. Claire closed her eyes briefly as another contraction tightened across her body. Amelia checked the monitor immediately. Still stable, she assured her gently. But stress is pushing your body too hard. Claire nodded faintly before whispering something that made Rosa's stomach turn cold. He wanted me quiet until Friday. Daniel stared at her. Why Friday? Claire opened her eyes slowly. Because that is when the transfer becomes permanent. Once the IPO money clears offshore, Ethan disappears with Vanessa. The room fell silent again. Daniel suddenly understood the basement for what it really was. Not panic. Not anger. Planning. Ethan had never intended for Claire to speak before Friday morning. A sharp knock interrupted the silence without warning. Everyone in the room froze instantly. Amelia turned toward the door cautiously. I did not authorize anyone upstairs. Daniel moved immediately, all marine instincts returning at once. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous. He stepped toward the entrance while Rosa instinctively positioned herself beside Claire's bed protectively. Another knock echoed through the room. Slower this time. Then a familiar female voice came through the door. Dr. Grant? It is Vanessa Hale. Claire's face lost all color instantly. Rosa whispered under her breath. Daniel's jaw tightened so hard the muscle moved beneath his skin. Outside, the storm intensified while the woman helping Ethan Bennett destroy his empire stood waiting only feet away from the hospital room where his pregnant wife had finally survived long enough to tell the truth. The hospital room went completely silent after Vanessa Hale spoke through the door. Rain hammered against the windows overlooking downtown Chicago while every person inside the room froze at once. Claire's breathing became uneven immediately. Rosa stepped closer beside the bed protectively while Daniel stared at the locked entrance with cold, unreadable eyes. Outside, the hallway remained quiet except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights and distant elevator chimes somewhere deeper inside the private clinic. Then Vanessa spoke again, softer this time. I know Claire is in there. Daniel moved first. He slipped the recorder into his jacket pocket and nodded once toward Amelia. The doctor quietly dimmed the monitor volume near Claire's bed while Rosa helped pull the blankets higher around her shoulders. Another knock followed. Calm. Patient. Controlled. Daniel finally unlocked the door halfway, but kept himself positioned firmly in the entrance. Vanessa Hale stood beneath the hallway lights wearing a cream-colored trench coat over an expensive black dress from the gala. Her blonde hair remained perfectly styled despite the storm outside. Diamonds glittered at her ears. From a distance, she still looked like the polished executive assistant photographed beside Ethan Bennett at charity events and business conferences. But tonight something inside her expression had changed. The confidence remained. The calm remained. Yet beneath both sat fear. Real fear. Vanessa looked past Daniel, immediately searching the room until her eyes landed on Claire alive inside the hospital bed. Shock flashed across her face before disappearing almost instantly. You survived, she whispered. Claire stared back silently. Daniel tightened one hand against the doorway. You have 30 seconds. Vanessa looked at him carefully. Ethan knows she escaped. Rosa felt Claire tense beneath the blankets. Vanessa continued before anyone could interrupt her. Half the security teams in Chicago are searching for her right now. Daniel crossed his arms slowly. Why are you here? Vanessa swallowed once. Because Ethan thinks I betrayed him. Silence hit the room again. Thunder rolled outside while the city lights flickered faintly through rain-streaked glass. Claire studied Vanessa carefully, trying to understand whether this was another manipulation or the first honest thing she had ever heard from her. Vanessa finally looked directly at Claire. I did not know he locked you underground. Claire's voice came out weak but steady. But you knew he was moving the money. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly before nodding once. Yes. Daniel's expression darkened immediately. Then you are involved. I know. Vanessa stepped slowly into the room now, carefully keeping her distance from everyone else. But Ethan was never planning to run away with me. Rosa frowned. What are you talking about? Vanessa laughed bitterly under her breath. Ethan Bennett does not love anyone except himself. She looked toward Claire again. 2 hours ago, he transferred everything into accounts only he controls. The offshore companies. The property deeds. Even the Cayman accounts connected to the IPO. Claire stared at her in disbelief. You are lying. I wish I was. Vanessa reached into her coat pocket slowly while Daniel instantly stiffened. Easy, she said quietly before placing a folded document onto the nearby counter. Read the date. Daniel grabbed the paper first. His eyes narrowed instantly. Emergency International Transfer Authorization. Signed less than 90 minutes earlier. Ethan Bennett's signature covered the bottom line. Vanessa folded her arms tightly across herself as though suddenly cold. Once he realized Claire escaped, he panicked. He thinks federal investigators already have evidence. Daniel looked up sharply. How do you know that? Vanessa met his eyes directly for the first time. Because Ethan called me from the ballroom 30 minutes ago and told me if anyone questioned me, I was responsible for everything. Rosa whispered under her breath. Claire stared at Vanessa with growing disbelief. He was going to sacrifice you. Vanessa smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. Men like Ethan always sacrifice somebody. Thunder cracked loudly outside the windows. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Claire slowly looked toward the folded document still in Daniel's hand. Why bring this here? Vanessa hesitated before answering. Because Ethan has something else hidden. Daniel's voice sharpened immediately. What? Vanessa looked toward the rain-covered skyline before speaking quietly. A second server. Daniel frowned. Server? Everything connected to the bribery accounts, fake charities, and shell corporations is backed up in a private server hidden beneath Bennett Capital headquarters. Claire's face drained slowly of color. Vanessa nodded once. If Ethan destroys it before federal investigators arrive, the paper documents alone will not be enough. Daniel's entire posture changed instantly. Marine instincts. Investigator instincts. Everything sharpening at once. Where? Vanessa reached into her purse and slowly removed a silver keycard. Sublevel 3. Private archive room. She placed it carefully beside the transfer documents. He keeps it behind biometric security. Rosa stared at her in shock. Why are you helping now? Vanessa looked toward Claire one final time. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. Because tonight I finally realized something. She swallowed hard. If Ethan Bennett could lock his pregnant wife underground and continue smiling upstairs while people sang him happy birthday. Her eyes darkened with something close to horror. Then nobody around him was ever safe. By 2:15 in the morning, the storm over Chicago had become violent enough to shake the hospital windows. Lightning flashed across the skyline, while Daniel Carter stood near the treatment room door staring down at the silver keycard Vanessa left behind. Nobody trusted her completely. Nobody in the room was foolish enough for that. But the fear in her eyes had been real. Claire saw it clearly. The same fear she once carried herself every time Ethan Bennett smiled too calmly during an argument. Amelia adjusted another warm blanket over Claire's legs while monitoring the baby's heartbeat beside the bed. Stable for now. Those 3 words were the only thing holding the room together. Rosa sat silently near the corner clutching a paper cup of untouched coffee while Vanessa remained alone beside the rain-covered windows, separated from everyone else by guilt thick enough to feel physical. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. If the backup server exists, Ethan will destroy it before sunrise. Vanessa nodded slowly without turning around. He already suspects federal investigators are coming. Claire looked toward her carefully. How much does Ethan know about the files I copied? Vanessa hesitated before answering. Not everything. Daniel crossed his arms tightly. Meaning? Vanessa faced them again, her polished appearance finally beginning to crack beneath exhaustion. Ethan thought Claire only discovered the offshore transfers connected to the IPO. She swallowed hard. He does not know she copied the charity records. Daniel's expression sharpened instantly. Charity records? Claire reached slowly for her phone charging beside the bed. The Bennett Foundation, she whispered. It was supposed to fund children's hospitals and housing programs. Rosa frowned. Supposed to? Claire unlocked another hidden folder and handed the phone toward Daniel. Ethan used the foundation to move money internationally through fake humanitarian contracts. Daniel scanned the files silently while thunder rolled outside again. His jaw tightened more with every page. This is federal prison-level corruption. Vanessa nodded once. That is why he built the backup server. Rosa looked between them nervously. Then call the police now. Daniel shook his head immediately. Local police will warn him before dawn. He looked toward Claire. If Ethan still has political protection, we need federal agents involved directly. Claire leaned weakly against the pillows, exhaustion visible in every movement now. Then what are we waiting for? Daniel glanced toward the recorder still sitting on the bedside table beside Ethan's voice, trapped permanently inside it. Once the transfer clears Friday morning, Claire signs nothing. Understood? The words echoed through his head like a countdown clock. Daniel pulled out his phone and dialed a secure number from memory. Miller. A tired male voice answered after 2 rings. You still with federal organized financial crimes? Depends who is asking. Daniel Carter. Silence followed immediately. Then the man's tone changed. What happened? Daniel stared toward the rain-soaked skyline beyond the hospital windows. I think I just found the missing piece connected to Bennett Capital. Across the room, Claire closed her eyes briefly as another contraction tightened through her body. Amelia checked the monitor instantly while Rosa moved beside the bed again. Still stable, Amelia whispered gently. But Claire could see the concern hidden beneath her calm expression now. Time was running short in more ways than one. Vanessa suddenly stiffened near the windows. Oh no! Everyone turned toward her immediately. Down below on the street far beneath the hospital tower, black SUVs had begun pulling beside the building entrance one after another. Headlights cut sharply through the rain, while security personnel stepped onto the sidewalk wearing dark jackets and earpieces. Ethan's private team. Rosa covered her mouth in shock. How did they find us? Daniel's expression hardened instantly. Because Ethan owns the building. The room went completely silent. Lightning flashed across the skyline again while more vehicles arrived downstairs. Men moved quickly beneath umbrellas speaking into radios while hospital staff gathered nervously inside the lobby entrance. Vanessa stepped backward from the window slowly, fear returning across her face. He came himself. Daniel looked down toward the street just in time to see Ethan Bennett exit the final SUV wearing the same black tuxedo from his birthday gala. Rain poured across his shoulders while camera flashes from arriving reporters lit the sidewalk around him. Even now he looked polished, controlled, dangerous. Claire stared down at her husband through the hospital glass 20 floors above the city and suddenly understood something terrifying. Ethan was not coming to save his reputation anymore. He was coming because he believed he was losing control. Daniel grabbed his jacket immediately. Lock this floor down, he told Amelia. Nobody enters without my permission. Rosa rose from her chair anxiously. What are you going to do? Daniel looked once toward Claire lying pale beneath the hospital lights. Then he turned toward the elevator hallway beyond the room. I am going to remind Ethan Bennett that tonight stopped being his story the moment his wife survived. The private elevator doors opened with a soft metallic sound that somehow felt louder than the thunder outside. Daniel Carter stepped into the hospital lobby alone, while rainwater dripped from the shoulders of Ethan Bennett's security team across polished marble floors. The entire entrance glowed beneath expensive chandelier lighting designed to calm wealthy patients and powerful visitors. Tonight, it looked like the lobby of a war zone disguised as luxury. Reporters crowded behind velvet barriers near the revolving doors while cameras flashed every few seconds against the storm-dark windows. Nobody knew the full story yet, but rich men arriving at private hospitals after midnight always attracted attention. Ethan Bennett stood near the reception desk, still wearing his black tuxedo from the birthday gala, one hand calmly adjusting his cufflinks while hospital executives hovered nervously around him. He looked perfectly composed. Too composed. The same controlled image he carried into boardrooms, interviews, and charity fundraisers. But Daniel saw something different now. Beneath the polished billionaire smile sat panic. Ethan turned slowly the moment he noticed Daniel approaching across the marble floor. The fake warmth disappeared instantly from his face. "Where is my wife?" he asked coldly. Daniel stopped only a few feet away. "Safe." Ethan's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "You are interfering in a private family matter." Daniel laughed once under his breath. Not amused. Not kind. "You locked your pregnant wife underground while guests sang happy birthday upstairs." Several reporters near the entrance immediately turned toward them. Cameras lifted. Ethan noticed it too. His public smile returned instantly, like someone flipping on a switch. "Claire has been struggling emotionally during the pregnancy," he said smoothly, loud enough for nearby reporters to hear. "I was deeply concerned for her safety." Daniel stared at him in disbelief. Even now Ethan was performing. Even now he thought image could save him. "Careful," Daniel said quietly. "You are starting to sound exactly like the recording." For the first time all night, Ethan Bennett completely froze. The lobby suddenly felt colder. Thunder rolled beyond the glass walls while camera flashes reflected across Ethan's face. He understood immediately. Daniel saw it happen in real time. The exact second Ethan realized the evidence existed outside his control. "You do not know what you are talking about," Ethan replied carefully. But the confidence had cracked now. Daniel stepped closer. Offshore accounts, fake charities, shell corporations, and a hidden server beneath Bennett Capital. Ethan's expression darkened completely. "Who told you that?" Before Daniel could answer, another voice suddenly echoed through the lobby behind them. "Federal agents." The revolving doors burst open as 4 men and 2 women wearing dark jackets stepped inside through the storm, carrying identification badges. Reporters exploded into shouting instantly, while camera flashes lit the marble lobby white. Ethan turned sharply just as Special Agent Robert Miller approached beside 2 financial crime investigators. "Ethan Bennett," Miller announced calmly, "we have a federal warrant to secure all digital and financial assets connected to Bennett Capital Holdings." Silence crashed across the entire lobby. Hospital staff stopped moving. Reporters pushed forward behind security ropes. Ethan stared at the agents for one long, dangerous second before laughing softly under his breath. "You have no idea who you are dealing with." Miller handed him the warrant anyway. "Actually," he replied calmly, "we do." Upstairs on the 20th floor, Claire watched everything unfold live through the hospital television mounted across from her bed. News helicopters already circled outside the building, broadcasting the story across Chicago. Rosa stood beside the window, crying quietly, while Amelia monitored the baby's heartbeat. Vanessa remained near the back wall, pale and silent, as Ethan's empire collapsed in real time beneath television cameras and federal warrants. Claire herself barely moved. She simply watched her husband's face on the screen as reporters shouted questions from every direction. "Did you imprison your wife? Is the recording real? Are the offshore accounts connected to corruption investigations?" Ethan tried speaking twice before federal agents escorted him toward the elevators. For the first time since Claire met him, Ethan Bennett looked genuinely afraid. Then the television audio changed suddenly. Another reporter had obtained leaked audio from the recorder recovered in the basement. Ethan's own voice filled the hospital room once more. "Once the transfer clears Friday morning, Claire signs nothing. Understood?" The silence afterward felt endless. Claire closed her eyes slowly while tears slipped down her face. Not from grief anymore. From release. Months of fear finally breaking apart inside her chest. Rosa squeezed her hand tightly. "It is over," she whispered. But Claire looked down at the steady monitor, tracking her baby's heartbeat beside the hospital bed, and shook her head gently. "No," she whispered through exhausted tears. "It is finally beginning." Outside, the storm slowly moved beyond Chicago while dawn crept faintly across the skyline. And somewhere beneath a mansion filled with empty champagne glasses and abandoned birthday decorations, a cold basement door still stood open.